Boxes lined the curb, my life spilling out like a broken puzzle. I stood frozen, staring at the heap, heart thundering in disbelief. What the hell just happened? I shouted, but no one answered. Gloria, my mother-in-law, smirked from the doorway like she'd staged this as a performance. My husband didn't move, didn't even blink. I had just been evicted at 52, left with nothing. Not a home, not respect, not even a word of warning. My hands shook as I clutched the car keys. Every memory of trust, love, and family turned to ash in seconds. The neighbors peeked from behind their curtains, whispering. I swung the car door open, dragging my dignity and a small bag into the cold morning. Tears and fury collided. "My name is Margaret Hayes," I muttered to myself, the words tasting strange and heavy. I sank into the driver's seat and slammed the door, the sound echoing like a warning. As I drove away, my mind replayed the cruel words, the glances, the little betrayals. I had lost everything overnight. But under the storm of humiliation, a fire sparked. I would not let them see me broken. I didn't know how yet, but one day they would regret every choice. I parked on a quiet street, the car engine ticking as it cooled, matching my jittering hands. My thoughts raced, the humiliation sharp like broken glass. I thought of my husband, his silence, his refusal to stand up to Gloria. I thought of Gloria herself, proud and cruel, always plotting, always watching. I had been blindsided, and the betrayal cut deeper than any words could. My apartment was gone, my belongings scattered. Every trophy, every memento, every small proof of my life as a professional, all discarded. I closed my eyes and tried to breathe, tried to make sense of a world that had suddenly shifted under me. Memories flooded back. The subtle jabs, the dinners where Gloria had mocked my intelligence, the quiet undermining of my career. The anger settled in my chest like a heavy stone. I was humiliated, yes, but also furious. And in that fury I found clarity. I would not crumble. I would rise. But first I needed shelter. I remembered a cheap motel near the edge of town, a place I had passed countless times. With trembling hands I started the car, each mile taking me further from the life I'd known, yet closer to the person I was about to become. The motel smelled of stale carpet and cleaning chemicals, but it was a roof over my head. I dragged my bag into the tiny room, flopped onto the bed, and let my body shake. I stared at the ceiling, counting the tiles as if they were the pieces of my life I could still hold. I had lost everything, yet somehow the anger made me feel alive. I remembered an old business card tucked into my wallet, a client I had once worked with, who respected my skills. It seemed small, almost silly, but at that moment it was a lifeline. I called the number, my voice tight with nerves and hope. "Hello, this is Margaret Hayes," I said, gripping the phone. The person on the other line paused, then remembered me, excitement in their tone. "Margaret, I didn't expect to hear from you." I forced a tight laugh. "I'm ready to work again," I said, each word heavy with determination. That night, as I lay on the thin mattress, I realized something important. They had taken my home, my comfort, my past, but they hadn't taken my mind, my skills, or my resolve. And with that, the first spark of my comeback ignited. I flashed back to a month before the eviction, a dinner at Gloria's house. She had served herself the largest portion, ignoring me entirely. Her eyes held that cold, calculating glint I now recognized as her power. I had tried to speak about my work, my plans, but she dismissed me with a sharp laugh. My husband had smiled weakly, not defending me. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but looking back, every insult, every snide remark, every ignored accomplishment added up to a storm that had just broken over me. I remembered the look on Gloria's face the morning she handed me the note. "You're not welcome here anymore." The memory made my stomach twist with anger and disbelief. How could someone I had trusted so deeply hurt me so completely? The betrayal was surgical, precise, leaving me with nothing. But it also taught me a harsh lesson. I could trust no one to save me but myself. That night, in the motel, I vowed silently that I would build something they could never touch. not through spite or sabotage, but through skill, strategy, and relentless effort. They had underestimated me, and that would be their greatest mistake. The first weeks were brutal. I rented a small storage unit, salvaged what I could, and started pitching my consulting services to anyone who would listen. Cold calls, long hours, rejections. Each felt like a tiny blow, yet also a push forward. I reminded myself constantly. I was 52, yes, but I was not powerless. I still had expertise, contacts, and determination. One small client took a chance on me, and I delivered flawlessly. The satisfaction was electric, but I did not celebrate. Couldn't. Gloria and my husband loomed in my mind, the injustice still fresh, their arrogance a constant reminder. Every success was measured against the life they had tried to erase. Slowly, incrementally, my reputation began to rebuild. I met people who respected my work, who didn't care about my past humiliation. And every evening as I returned to my small motel room, I plotted, not with anger that would burn me out, but with calculated patience. The fire in me grew. One day they would see. One day, everything they had thought untouchable would crumble. I only needed time, skill, and courage to ensure it happened. The small client satisfaction opened doors I hadn't thought possible. Word of my work began to spread quietly, people remembering the meticulous care and insight I brought to each project. Every morning I woke early, fueled by the memory of my eviction, and stayed late, ensuring nothing slipped through my hands. I rented a tiny office, the walls bare but functional, a space where I could rebuild my career and, quietly, my dignity. Occasionally, I imagined Gloria hearing about my small victories. I smiled at the thought. It was petty maybe, but satisfying. One afternoon, an old colleague reached out, surprised to hear from me after all those years. "Margaret," she said, "I've been wondering what happened to you. I always knew you had it in you." Her words were a balm, and they reminded me that skill and integrity couldn't be erased. I worked harder than ever. Each project completed a testament to my perseverance. Evenings were long and lonely, but my determination strengthened. Every rejection fueled my resolve. I began making a list of the people who had wronged me and noting where they were vulnerable, not for sabotage but for future accountability. One day the scales would balance. I just needed patience, strategy, and the confidence I was slowly reclaiming step by step. By the third month, I had a steady flow of clients. Each project increased my credibility and my confidence grew. I noticed how people started asking for my advice, valuing my opinions in ways that Gloria had never done. The more I succeeded, the more the memory of being cast aside fueled me. I kept careful notes on Gloria and my husband, understanding their weaknesses and patterns. One afternoon, I walked past a cafe where I overheard them laughing with friends, bragging about my supposed failures. I clenched my hands but smiled quietly. Let them talk. Let them underestimate me. That arrogance would be their undoing. I also reconnected with former colleagues who admired my work, people who had respected me before Gloria's interference. Their trust felt restorative, and I realized I had begun building a new family. Professional, supportive, and reliable. Slowly, I started networking in circles I had never accessed before. Every meeting, every contract, every successful project felt like a brick in the foundation of my comeback. And deep down, I understood that my time was coming. Soon, they would see that the woman they had thrown out with nothing was unstoppable, and the quiet satisfaction of proving that would be sweeter than any revenge. The first time I saw Gloria and my husband in a professional setting after my comeback was electric. I was presenting a proposal to a client, confident and polished, when I felt eyes on me. I glanced across the room and caught Gloria staring, her smile tight, her expression unreadable. My husband avoided my gaze, pretending not to know me. The client was impressed, asking intelligent questions, nodding at my responses. I answered confidently, careful, measured, each word a small victory. Gloria's tension was palpable. She fidgeted, whispered to someone, and her facade slipped slightly. I kept my composure, letting my work speak. The thrill of being recognized for my skill and professionalism, in front of the people who had tried to erase me, was intoxicating. I didn't gloat, but I allowed myself a small, private smile. After the meeting, the client offered a lucrative contract. Gloria's face fell as she realized I had secured what she had always desired. Walking back to my office, I felt a surge of empowerment. I was no longer the powerless woman they had dismissed. I had returned not just to survive but to thrive, and the best part was they had no idea what was coming next. Weeks passed, and my small victories began to ripple outward. Clients recommended me to others, and my reputation became unstoppable. Gloria's whispers in business circles could no longer overshadow my work. My husband, once my confidant, remained distant, clearly unsettled by my progress. One evening, I received an invitation to a networking event Gloria's firm was attending. My pulse quickened, knowing I would face her directly. I prepared meticulously, selecting my outfit, reviewing every detail of my presentation, and rehearsing how I would respond to her attempts to undermine me. The night of the event, Gloria arrived late, flaunting her confidence. But as I mingled, her smirk faltered. Every compliment I received, every hand I shook, reminded me of the power I had rebuilt. When it was time to speak in front of the room, I held the floor effortlessly. My clarity, expertise, and charm silenced any doubt. Gloria's frustration was obvious, and my husband's discomfort was almost palpable. As I left the podium to polite applause, I felt the tide shift. The first cracks in Gloria's armor were visible, and deep inside I realized that every painstaking step, every sacrifice, every sleepless night was leading to this moment, one small but significant victory in my long game. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in subtle strategy. I had learned to anticipate Gloria's moves, noticing patterns in her behavior, understanding her arrogance. I stayed professional at all times, letting results speak louder than words. I started to build alliances quietly, consulting for firms that competed with Gloria's business. I never lied, cheated, or sabotaged. My revenge would be earned through excellence. One afternoon, a competitor approached me, unknowingly aligning with my plan to expose weaknesses in Gloria's firm. I smiled inwardly, recognizing the opportunity. Each meeting, each contract, each small success chipped away at the wall Gloria had built around her pride. My husband attempted to intervene subtly, offering advice I didn't need. I ignored him, focusing on what mattered, my work and my comeback. I realized that the more patient I was, the sweeter the eventual victory would be. Every calculated move brought me closer to the day when Gloria's arrogance would falter publicly. That day I promised myself I would not just return, I would rise, and they would finally understand that the woman they had dismissed with nothing was unstoppable. Every fiber of my being bristled with anticipation and quiet satisfaction. Gloria tried to confront me publicly during a client meeting. Her eyes narrowed as she opened her mouth, intending to embarrass me. But I had prepared for everything. I answered her jabs calmly, with facts and professionalism, letting her words bounce off me. The room felt tense, everyone aware of the silent battle. My heart raced, but I stayed composed. Gloria's smirk faltered as the client nodded at my response, impressed with my clarity and expertise. The satisfaction that coursed through me was electric. After the meeting, I walked down the hallway, my husband trailing behind, silent and uneasy. Gloria had underestimated me yet again. That evening, I reviewed the meeting in my motel room, noting her weaknesses and missteps. Every detail mattered. The first crack in her confidence had appeared, and I could sense her rising panic. Slowly, methodically, I was turning the tables. It was no longer about proving myself to strangers. It was about reclaiming what was mine. The fire that had been smoldering since the eviction burned hotter now. Each calculated move, every display of skill and composure, was part of a larger plan. Gloria might still think she controlled the narrative, but she was already losing. And that knowledge, that tiny spark of satisfaction, kept me awake that night, plotting the next steps in my quiet, unstoppable rise. The days that followed were a careful dance. I quietly consulted for competitors of Gloria's firm, each meeting strengthening my influence. I stayed professional, never revealing personal motives, letting results speak for me. I noticed small details: Gloria's reliance on outdated strategies, her overconfidence in public appearances. I catalogued everything mentally, preparing for the moment when the culmination of my work would become undeniable. My husband remained passive, an unwilling participant in her schemes, clearly uncomfortable around me. One afternoon, a client remarked on my ability to anticipate challenges before they became problems. That recognition, earned without arrogance, reminded me why I could never rely on others' opinions to measure my worth. My fire was my own. Gloria, unaware of the alliances I was forming, continued her overconfident approach, walking straight into my slow, deliberate plan. Each day I gained small victories. Praise, new clients, credibility. Every step added to the momentum of my comeback. I realized that the power of quiet observation and careful action was far stronger than any impulsive retaliation. And I knew that soon Gloria would have nowhere to hide. My patience, once a necessity, had become a weapon, and I would use it with precision, finally proving that being underestimated was their greatest mistake. One night, exhausted, I remembered a dinner from years ago, a seemingly small moment that had foreshadowed this betrayal. Gloria had mocked my ambitions, her laughter slicing through the room, while my husband smiled weakly, offering no defense. I had dismissed it at the time, rationalizing it, excusing it. Now I saw it clearly. The roots of my eviction, the calculated undermining of my career, the subtle cruelty that had been building for decades. That memory fueled me, reminding me why patience alone wasn't enough. I needed strategy, precision, and unwavering focus. I reviewed my list of contacts and potential clients, identifying those who could help me rebuild not just financially, but professionally, and ultimately morally victorious. Every step had to be perfect. I also planned my first direct confrontation. Not aggressive, not mean, but public enough to expose Gloria's arrogance without me ever appearing vindictive. That night, as I jotted notes in my worn notebook, I felt a thrill I hadn't experienced in years. This was no longer survival. This was empowerment. And slowly, the realization sank in. The woman who had thrown me out would soon see the cost of her cruelty. She had underestimated me completely, and her arrogance would be her undoing. I smiled quietly, anticipation building for the perfect moment when skill, patience, and timing would converge. The opportunity arrived sooner than expected. A client approached me with a project Gloria had been pursuing for months. I could feel the subtle shift in the air as they mentioned the need for a strong, capable leader. I accepted the project without hesitation. Every detail mattered. I meticulously planned, researched, and prepared presentations that anticipated questions before they were asked. Gloria, unaware, continued her aggressive approach, confident in her assumed control. I watched from a professional distance as she stumbled over small missteps, failing to anticipate problems I had already solved. Every victory I gained was quiet but undeniable. Clients praised my foresight, colleagues sought my advice, and I began to feel the weight of empowerment returning. My husband, increasingly uneasy, tried small interventions, offering help I didn't need. I ignored him, keeping focus on the larger plan. The satisfaction was not in revenge, but in demonstrating capability, showing that skill and integrity outlast arrogance. That evening, I reflected on how far I had come, realizing that patience, diligence, and quiet strategy had shifted the balance. Gloria's blind confidence was eroding, and I was poised to capitalize on every mistake she made, ready to reclaim not only my dignity but the recognition I had earned. The following week, I attended a networking event where Gloria and my husband were also present. My heart raced as I prepared for the inevitable encounter, but I reminded myself to stay composed. Gloria arrived late, flaunting confidence, attempting to intimidate with a poised smile. But it faltered as I entered the room, radiating professionalism and quiet authority. Each conversation I engaged in was strategic, building recognition, credibility, and alliances, while her attempts to assert control faltered. I noticed the slight tremor in her smile and the subtle shifts in posture of those around her, unconsciously validating my growing influence. My husband looked increasingly uncomfortable, no longer able to intervene successfully. Every handshake, every compliment, and every inquiry reinforced the tide turning in my favor. As the evening progressed, I realized that patience and skill had transformed me from powerless victim to respected professional. The thrill of that realization, without any gloating, without any sabotage, was unmatched. By the time I left the event, it was clear. Gloria's influence was waning, her arrogance no longer sufficient to dominate the room. I had turned the first real corner in my comeback, and the fire in me burned brighter than ever. They had underestimated me completely, and the stage was set for everything that would follow. A major opportunity came unexpectedly. A high-profile client reached out directly, praising my expertise and requesting me to lead a project Gloria had long coveted. My pulse quickened as I realized the chance to solidify my influence while remaining completely professional. I prepared meticulously, reviewing every potential challenge and anticipating questions before they were asked. Gloria had no idea I was leading this initiative. Every small victory so far had built to this moment. I noticed her subtle panic when she learned of my involvement, her face briefly betraying frustration before she forced a smile. My husband lingered nearby, uncomfortable, silently acknowledging my progress. As I presented solutions and strategies, the client's reactions were enthusiastic, validating my skill and authority. Every detail of my planning paid off, and I felt the quiet satisfaction of seeing competence triumph where arrogance had failed. Gloria's influence began to waver in real time, and the knowledge that I was reclaiming control through hard work and intelligence, not malice, thrilled me. That evening, I reviewed the meeting in my small office, knowing that the project would shift the balance of power permanently. I was closer than ever to full vindication, and the anticipation of watching Gloria confront her own miscalculations filled me with a quiet, steady fire. Patience and strategy had brought me to the edge of a major victory. I began crafting the final steps of my strategy, ensuring every move was calculated and flawless. I focused on the project, but my mind constantly anticipated Gloria's reactions. She was arrogant, predictable, and impatient, perfectly exploitable without crossing any moral line. I strengthened professional alliances, consulted discreetly with colleagues who had always respected my judgment, and mapped out the moment when my successes would become undeniable. My husband, increasingly anxious, attempted minor interventions, offering unsolicited advice I calmly ignored. Each day, my influence and credibility grew. I watched Gloria falter in subtle ways, missed details, miscommunications, small errors, and recorded them in my mind. I didn't gloat, I observed. The final move would not be about humiliation, only undeniable evidence that skill and integrity triumph over arrogance. One afternoon, as I finalized the project proposal, I felt a thrill of anticipation. The careful, methodical build-up of months, the countless sleepless nights, the meticulous planning, all of it was about to culminate in a moment that would shift perceptions permanently. Gloria had underestimated me, and the world would soon see the results of her arrogance. My quiet fire burned hotter than ever, the certainty of success a comforting, exhilarating weight that propelled me forward toward the ultimate vindication. Just when it felt like everything was aligning, a competitor emerged. Unexpected, aggressive, and seemingly threatening my project. Panic nudged briefly at my mind, but I quickly realized this was not a threat but an opportunity. They were unknowingly aligned with my plan, their moves predictable and exploitable. I adjusted strategies, integrating their presence into my approach, turning a potential obstacle into leverage. Gloria, unaware of the depth of my orchestration, grew frantic, attempting public interventions and subtle intimidation. Each misstep she made reinforced my quiet advantage. I maintained composure, keeping the client focused on facts and solutions, while Gloria's desperation became more visible. I marveled at the irony. Her own arrogance blinded her to the shifts happening around her. My husband attempted to advise, but I continued to ignore his small, useless suggestions. By the end of the day, I had turned what seemed like chaos into an advantage, subtly highlighting my ability to manage complex situations while Gloria faltered. My patience and methodical planning were paying off, and the anticipation of the moment when my success would be undeniable filled me with quiet satisfaction. The pieces were falling into place, one calculated step at a time, and Gloria's control slipped further from her grasp. I subtly redirected Gloria's public attempts to undermine me, transforming each action into evidence of her flaws. It was careful, precise, and entirely professional. No sabotage, no lies, just undeniable results. Each victory, small but visible, eroded her credibility among clients and colleagues. My husband grew increasingly uncomfortable, realizing the extent of my progress and the futility of his loyalty to Gloria. I stayed composed, letting professionalism, skill, and timing speak for themselves. One evening I reviewed client feedback, glowing praise, notes highlighting my foresight, and repeated mentions of my calm efficiency under pressure. Gloria's panic was visible in her body language, her efforts increasingly desperate. The thrill of controlled triumph, of watching arrogance unravel without crossing ethical lines, was intoxicating. I documented each step, aware that the cumulative effect would be powerful when fully revealed. Patience had become my strongest weapon, and observation my shield. The emotional satisfaction grew steadily, like a simmering fire that would soon become a blaze. I understood fully that true victory was not in humiliation, but in undeniable accomplishment. And as Gloria's mistakes accumulated, the anticipation of the moment when the world would recognize my competence, when my past humiliation would be overshadowed by my success, filled me with a quiet, steady joy, the kind that could not be taken away. Doubt crept in for a fleeting moment. Even after months of planning, success, and careful maneuvering, I questioned whether I could fully reclaim the life I had lost. Exhaustion gnawed at me, and the memories of humiliation haunted quiet evenings. But I refused to falter. I reminded myself that every client, every meeting, every achievement had been earned honestly. I had rebuilt my career through skill and perseverance, not luck or deceit. The realization strengthened me, clarifying that my victory would be complete because it was deserved. An old colleague hinted at a final opportunity to cement my influence, an event where Gloria's arrogance would be impossible to ignore. I prepared meticulously, envisioning every interaction, every question, every presentation. Patience had brought me here, and strategy would carry me to the ultimate payoff. My husband's anxiety was palpable, his silence a reminder of their misplaced confidence. And as I reviewed my plans one last time, I felt the anticipation of true vindication. The moment when Gloria's mistakes, arrogance, and cruelty would be fully visible, and my success undeniable. The fire in me, born from betrayal and nurtured by determination, was ready to erupt. The final chapters of this long game were near, and the satisfaction I would feel, earned, controlled, and undeniable, was within reach. The networking event arrived, tense and charged. Gloria was there, radiating confidence that had begun to fray at the edges. My pulse was steady, though anticipation buzzed in my veins. I spoke first, engaging clients with clarity and authority, subtly highlighting solutions that Gloria had failed to foresee. Her face tightened, every word she uttered faltering under scrutiny. The audience began to shift toward me, drawn to competence and foresight. My husband lingered nervously, realizing the power dynamics had changed. Gloria attempted one final interruption, aiming to reclaim authority, but every question she posed revealed her lack of preparation. I responded calmly, articulately, turning each of her blunders into evidence of competence versus arrogance. Applause followed, polite at first, then genuine, as clients recognized who truly held mastery over the room. The thrill of watching her unravel without uttering a single mean word was intoxicating. By the time I left the stage, it was clear. The tide had turned completely. Gloria's public credibility was compromised, and I had gained undeniable influence. My meticulous planning, patience, and professionalism had shifted the balance. I felt a deep satisfaction, knowing that the long, slow burn of my efforts had reached a tipping point. The next steps would seal the victory fully, and Gloria had no idea what was coming. The following week, a minor competitor unexpectedly challenged my authority in front of key clients. Panic flashed in Gloria's eyes, and my husband's discomfort was almost painful to watch. But I had anticipated every variable. I welcomed the competitor's input, redirecting their statements to highlight my own expertise subtly. Gloria's attempts to regain control became frantic and obvious. Every misstep she made underscored her arrogance and lack of foresight. My calm responses drew attention and admiration, while her panic became the invisible spotlight highlighting my competence. I could feel the satisfaction building within me. This was the fruit of months of strategy, patient effort, and self-belief. Each client interaction, each compliment, each subtle acknowledgement reinforced my rising power. My husband's attempts to intervene were useless. He could not undo months of planning, and Gloria's credibility crumbled visibly. By evening, I reviewed each interaction in my notebook, noting every subtle advantage gained. Every conversation, every careful maneuver had brought me closer to the ultimate payoff. Soon, the world would see that the woman they had thrown out with nothing had returned, not with malice, but with undeniable skill and quiet authority. The final steps were near, and the anticipation of full vindication thrummed through me like electricity. Gloria's public downfall arrived subtly but unmistakably. At a client presentation, she stumbled over details I had anticipated, her arrogance betraying her lack of preparation. I stayed composed, guiding discussions with clarity and authority. Clients noticed the contrast instantly. Gloria's mistakes, once invisible behind her confidence, were now glaring. My husband looked uncomfortable, watching the woman he had underestimated unravel. By the end of the meeting, Gloria's influence had shrunk dramatically, her credibility fractured. I felt a surge of quiet satisfaction, tempered by professionalism. Later, I learned that several key clients had shifted allegiance entirely. My planning, patience, and strategic observation had transformed months of small victories into undeniable dominance. Gloria's arrogance, once a fortress, had become her undoing. That evening I sat alone, reflecting on how far I had come, from being evicted with nothing, to orchestrating a comeback that left the architect of my humiliation powerless. The fire that had burned inside me since that curbside eviction had finally achieved its purpose. I didn't need revenge through cruelty. I had achieved justice through skill, integrity, and unwavering determination. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to feel entirely victorious, knowing the world now recognized my worth. Empowerment washed over me in waves. My career was thriving, my credibility unshakable, and Gloria's attempts to reconcile were meaningless. My husband's apologies were weak and inadequate. I didn't need them. I had rebuilt my life on my own terms. Recognition, respect, and influence flowed steadily, earned entirely through skill and patience. Friends and colleagues celebrated my success, unaware of the long, meticulous journey behind it. Gloria's attempts at regaining status fell flat, her public failures still fresh. I maintained composure, savoring quiet satisfaction. The greatest triumph was not in seeing her fail, but in seeing that I had grown beyond the need for validation from those who had once humiliated me. Every project, every client, every professional win was a testament to the power of persistence and integrity. I realized that empowerment is quiet, confident, and deliberate. Does not need to scream to be felt. As I closed my office that evening, I smiled, reflecting on the months of preparation and effort that had led me here. Gloria's arrogance, once untouchable, had been dismantled by nothing more than skill, patience, and moral fortitude. I was finally free to thrive fully, without constraint or interference, and that freedom was more satisfying than any imagined revenge. The final chapter of my journey was bittersweet yet complete. I stood in my new office, light streaming through large windows, the hum of work filling the space. Gloria and my husband were reduced to shadows of their former dominance, forced to confront their arrogance and failures. I had rebuilt a life from nothing, not through malice, but through intelligence, patience, and unwavering focus. Every sleepless night, every strategic move, every careful choice had culminated in this moment of undeniable victory. I finally allowed myself to breathe deeply, savoring the satisfaction of triumph earned honestly. My past humiliation was replaced by confidence, respect, and accomplishment. The world saw me as competent, powerful, and unstoppable. I had taken what was stolen and replaced it with something far greater: self-respect, dignity, and a legacy of perseverance. Gloria's influence was gone, my husband's complicity meaningless, and I was free. I had returned richer, stronger, and wiser. And as I gazed out over the city I now helped shape with my work, I whispered to myself, a quiet smile on my lips. I left with nothing once. Now I leave nothing for anyone to doubt me again. The long game was complete, the fire of betrayal transformed into triumph, and justice, earned and undeniable, had been served.